Hey guys, welcome to another GameXplain discussion. I'm your host, Andre Seegers, and this time we're joined by Derek Binner and Ted from Brainscratch Comps to discuss a new patent from Nintendo that might reveal some interesting Project NX details. So let's get started. Alright guys, so this came out a few hours ago. Specifically, a poster on NeoGAF called Rosti found that Nintendo recently filed a patent that details some information about an upcoming console. Now, we don't know for sure if it's the NX. It seems like it's plausible and very likely is, but it could be something else too. At any rate, the details basically so far boil down to the fact that it sounds like the system is not going to have a media drive, or rather a disk drive. So that means like no CDs, DVDs, or Blu-rays. Instead, it sounds like it could be a digital-only device, or some other people are also reading into it that it will, in fact, have a cartridge slot, or like an SD card slot, for instance, which you would load your games on. So kind of like the 3DS, or really any handheld system from Nintendo. And then there's a little bit more to this, but I figured we would cover that aspect first. Yeah, what do you guys make of this? If this is, in fact, the future of the NX, where it either has, where everything is either digital only, or everything comes on a small cartridge.
I know you disagree with me on this point, but boy, do I hope it comes with a small cartridge. I don't want to get rid of physical media yet. I mean, it's cool that they're slimming it down and they're really that forward thinking. Like, I never expected Nintendo to be the first one to try out like a no disc version of a console, where it could be just all downloads and everything else. But I don't see it happening. I think the idea that it's going to use cartridges in the same way that the 3DS does is a little bit more plausible, because they don't want to cut off the GameStop connection, and not everybody has a stable online connection in the United States or around the world, really. So you do want to have some sort of physical based media at this point, so you don't cut off some of your market.
Yeah, I kind of have a complicated view on it, because personally I like having a wall full of games. Like, you know, I like having physical stuff. It feels better. Now I do dip into digital occasionally. It depends on the game mostly. Like something like Animal Crossing, I'd be more likely to get a digital version for than say like I don't know, a Star Fox or whatever. But it's, you know, I'm not opposed to a digital service idea, as long as they do have a physical option. Now, the thing that worries me is that they have an idea for a cartridge slot instead of a disc, and like, I don't really mind that it is like a cartridge, because it's not going to be like a big bulky N64 type thing. It's probably going to be like an SD card shaped or 3DS shape. I'm just wondering, like, how proprietary is this going to be, and is it going to be like the N64, the GameCube, where they don't get some games just because the companies, third parties specifically, have to publish and manufacture games specifically for the NX or whatever this console ends up being called, instead of just being able to ship them all from one place or whatnot? Because that was something that had gone back for a while, is that Nintendo always had their own proprietary format for everything that they did, and it got on people's nerves. So
yeah, well, we have seen them open up more recently, like, you know, with the Wii supporting SD cards and the Wii U supporting standard hard drives, which is something I think is that the Xbox One doesn't even do. So I mean, that is pretty forward thinking. So yeah, I guess the question is that just an expandable memory slot, or is it actually for cartridges? But there is a lot to basically dissect in just that portion alone. To address the part about it potentially being digital only, I'd be pretty much completely on board with that. When I was younger, I used to be opposed to that. In recent times, I've warmed up to the idea. Especially, so actually what's funny is on our past discussion about the NX, I actually mentioned how I thought they could go to, they may move to a digital-only format, because I think it makes a lot of sense for Nintendo, as does the cartridge format in this case. But then I got totally shot down by Derek and Ash, so I actually cut that from the discussion, because I'm like, oh, I guess I'm the dumb one here. It turns out that might actually be the case, but if they did go that route, I don't think they would necessarily cut off the GameStop connection, as you mentioned, Derek, because they could go with the idea I mentioned originally, which I cut, is that they could just go with like an amiibo-based thing, right? Where you can like buy a card, you scan into your system, and that it will unlock the digital version of the game. But yeah, as one who like, as I mentioned before, I threw out my entire box collection of games a couple years ago, and I don't miss it at all. I threw out all my DVDs, all my movies, like I'm pretty much totally digital now, except for my games. And I'm totally cool with moving into that.
What if like the apocalypse hits and then
I think I'll have bigger issues
to your cloud.
A better example, no offense, Ted, is that like, what if some of these games get pulled? We've seen it happen already with digital-based games. It happened with Konami and PT. It's happened with Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Those are no longer on the digital space, and you lose access to that unless you've already got a hold of it. Now, with a physical copy, it's rare and becomes a lot more expensive, as we see with a lot of these other types of games like Earthbound, where they didn't have a huge amount of production, but they are still always available. Mm-hmm. There is no way to track down PT or Scott Pilgrim unless you have you've already downloaded it, and that's another big reason I'm sort of resistant to this idea of the digital space. Plus, I like to physically own what I have. Now, I'll do digital games as is Ted, but it's not my preferred method. Like, I've actually gotten digital games and then like for review, and then I'll go out and buy a physical copy, just because I prefer to have that physical copy.
Oh my God, that's a sickness, dude. Jeez.
Or maybe he just wants to support the creators that make his games.
Okay, well that's a different argument, and that's a better argument. But
yeah, but there's not just like stuff can get pulled for a variety of reasons. Like, for example, with Marvel vs. Capcom. Not only like you can buy a copy of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom now and still play the game just fine, but because of like licensing deals with Disney, Marvel, Capcom, and all of that, you can't buy the DLC anymore. So it's just, I don't like living in an environment where I could only buy part of a game digitally, or I can't even buy a game at all anymore because suddenly Nintendo doesn't entirely own the rights to such and such brand anymore, and they don't want to have it up on the store or whatnot. It's kind of a slippery slope, I think, and it's not something I'm entirely comfortable with.
So, this is, of course, assuming everything stays the same as it functions now, and I would hope there would be some reform with how digital releases are handled, so that would be less of an issue. But I think that would have to be changed. But I don't think we're going to be stuck with the way digital media is handled now for perpetuity. So I think that will have to be changed at some point. I hope that it does. And I think it would have to if some console did move to a digital-only format. But we've already seen like the PC already is basically digital-only, and that's worked out pretty well for it. I'm sure. I know it has its issues as well, but I don't think it's impossible. And everything seems insane until someone finally takes that first step. When MacBook Air dropped the CD drive, like people were in an uproar, and of course, like who cares now about CD drives in their laptops at all these days? So I think it makes sense, and beyond that, or actually, and let's even just step away from that a little bit, because there are valid, there are real concerns for it too, but there is a potential of it having a cartridge slot as well, and regardless of which route they go, this offers multiple benefits, because we already know Nintendo likes having a cheaper system, like they don't like having expensive systems. By removing the Blu-ray drive, that cuts a huge chunk of the cost right there. That also removes a huge amount of space of the system. Most of the Wii U is for the Blu-ray drive. By removing that, you can make a much smaller system that also removes all the moving parts, meaning that's pretty much nothing. That also removes the chance or reduces the chance of it breaking down. It also should load faster. I guess that it has potential of loading faster. But perhaps the coolest thing is they are in fact going with the cartridge route. This could suggest that cartridges will work on both the NX console, assuming it's a platform, and the NX handheld. Because Nintendo's already talked about how they want to, they've merged their handheld and console teams, and this could be the next step, where you buy a game and it's compatible with both systems.
Yeah, that is all true, and let's assume that there is no cartridge slot and it is all digital. That also means that they don't have to deal with physical retailers demanding specific prices, because part of the reason why digital games are cost just as much as the physical games, even though like you're not paying for the shipping, the packaging, the manual, the labor of the people who sell it to you. That's because like companies like GameStop or Best Buy or whatever would get there's some sort of legal clause, but mostly it has to do with like game pressure from companies like GameStop wanting digital to not be a better option than physical, so that you go to a GameStop and they don't go out of business. But theoretically, if this is a all digital console, Nintendo can price games at whatever the hell they want and nobody will care. So Star Fox could be $40, Mario could be $20, Metroid could be $60, Zelda could be $80 if they wanted to. Again, they could abuse it for their own benefit as well. But that would be very interesting, because we could essentially get what amounts to a AAA game for less than the $60 traditional AAA price, which could be very nice.
I mean, but we've seen Nintendo do that already, even with retail stores, where they released what was like Kirby at, I guess, I mean, it depends on your definition of AAA, but as a first-party Nintendo title, and that came in at what, like $40, and they've done that a bunch of the Wii U games.
No,
actually.
A 3DS. Rainbow Curse. I thought you were thinking.
Yeah, Rainbow Curse. I mean, Mario Party 10, I think. Was reduced in price too, but even if they did go digital only, I think they would still have a retail component. As I mentioned, they could do like the Amiibo route, where you buy, or in another way, just buy download cards at the store that you would just type the number into your system and download it that way. Kind of like how they do for like Xbox points. So I think I think there will always be a retail component, but it could just ultimately be digital only. But again, they may not go that route. They may go the cartridge route.
Yeah, I could see definitely both ways, and how each would have its own benefits or things that are kind of against it. But I think the whole fact that even if, let's say this isn't an SD card, or let's say that you are right in how the SD card could go back and forth between a portable console and a home console, it makes me wonder, like, what are the differences going to be if like one's portable, one's not? Like I think it's already been said that it's not one console that you can have a component that you can just take away. If it uses the same media, as far as like that one SD card, what are we looking at here when it comes to these consoles, and what's the advantage to getting a home version versus a handheld version, other than the obvious transportability?
It's also kind of worrying to me in the sense that part of the reason why, like, because part of this that I'm hearing is that if the NX is like half portable, half home console, and it does have the power of a home console that you can take like on the road, that's not necessarily a great thing, because one of the reasons why the PlayStation Vita didn't do so well is because games were way harder to develop and way more expensive to develop, because the graphics capabilities were so much better. So in a way, since the 3DS doesn't have as good of a graphics component, it's cheaper to make games for it, which is why there were more titles for it and why it ended up succeeding where the Vita didn't. And I'm oversimplifying things there, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So like if they were going to make a game for the NX, like would it end up being really expensive to develop for, because they have to be able to essentially like either develop two versions of a game, one portable, one non-portable, or they have to design a game to look really nice on a portable hardware, which is not easy to do. That also could be a little bit worrying.
Yeah, I mean, it raises a lot of questions. Like, I am almost wondering if they are, because they've mentioned iOS, I believe, before as like a model that's worked well for Apple, of course. And Nintendo has often looked. It seems like they have often looked to Apple for like inspiration. I'm not saying they ripped them off or anything. I'm just saying, like, oftentimes, like, they do share similar philosophies at points. I do wonder if NX might just be a singular platform, much more so than any current console and handheld generation. So I'm almost wondering if you buy one game and maybe basically I'm wondering if NX is just like a gateway to the same content. You just choose how you want to access it via different different hardware you can buy. So it could be like a TV, the home console component or the handheld component, maybe in different sizes, and they would all use the same media. And assuming they don't use all the same hardware, they could scale the games maybe, kind of like PC games. So if you're playing on the console, presumably it might be more powerful than the handheld. You would get the best, the overall best experience. Maybe playing on the 3DS, it would be downscale, or handheld NX or whatever, it will be downscaled to fit that lesser hardware.
That's not a terrible idea. I mean, it makes sense. It definitely could work. It's just whether or not they'll actually go forward to that degree. And the problem is there's a lot of different ways to interpret this and a lot of different ways it can go. But on the whole, it's really interesting and very, like, this seems like a pretty aggressive move from Nintendo.
A lot of people have said, like, panic mode Nintendo is the best Nintendo, and they are kind of are in panic mode right now. I mean, they've kind of turned things around recently, largely thanks to Amiibo, but they, who knows if that bubble will last, and they need to find the next platform that will last for them. And last time they went off the wall, brought us a Wii, which some people, may not be the biggest fans of, but that was a huge success for them. And they are going to do something, unconventional for their next system, which they've said as much. While it is said, they are doing something different with it. Now, speaking of which, actually, there was one other aspect to this component, or to this patent, and it did mention that along with the patent, it mentioned a controller with a screen inside it, which is of course similar to the Wii U. Now that's something I thought they would be very happy to drop, because it does not seem like something anyone really wanted with a Wii U, although that could partially be because of how Nintendo's made use of it. What do you guys think about that, though? Having, potentially having another Wii U-like controller with the NX, or possibly, assuming this is even NX related.
I think it might just be for ease of backwards compatibility. Because a lot of people haven't picked up the Wii U, obviously. It hasn't been doing very well for Nintendo at all. But there's still plenty of great games on the system. I love Pikmin 3, I love Splatoon, and the Smash 4 is great. So if they were going to make the NX, I think that making the games, the thing, backwards compatible, at least digitally, would be a good idea for them. Because that was, I'm pretty sure, a big selling point for a lot of people when the Wii came out, was, oh, I can play all these GameCube games I missed out. So... I think that would probably mostly be it. I think it would probably have a more standard controller. Otherwise, if I had to guess, it would probably still support Wii controllers of all sorts of stuff, because that's just Bluetooth and that's really easy to implement. But I'm pretty sure, that they would, for the standard Wii NX controller, it would probably be kind of a pretty traditional 4 buttons control sticks kind of model, because the general sense I'm getting from people lately is that they're sick of Nintendo having silly controllers. And, I like me a silly controller, but I can't, if the system's going to do better and thus I'm going to get more games on it, I'll drop the silly controller and just have something more standard in that case. So.
Mm-hmm. I don't mind using the Wii U gamepad. It's,
I like using it as well. It's just I know a lot of people don't seem to like it.
Oh, no,
it's too big or whatever.
Yeah, no, I've definitely heard that complaint, but personally, I've never minded it much. I use it the most out of any of the controllers for the Wii U. I think it feels fine in my hand, and it does the little bit of use that it does get. That it's fine, and there is something to be said about being able to play a game and put it on the tiny screen and go elsewhere and do something else. I like the idea that they're already keeping in mind backwards compatibility. I like backwards compatibility. I like not having to worry about trying to fit every damn platform underneath my TV. I can sort of combine in certain cases. So I'm excited about that. I'm glad to continue to support the Wii U and potentially finding ways to have a smoother transition to the NX from the Wii U than just stopping a Wii U production altogether and then just, okay, let's get the NX rolling.
Guys, did you forget this system presumably has no disk drive?
Well, I understand.
That is true.
I can imagine that they'd put like Wii U games up on the eShop.
Yeah, that's gonna upset a lot of people though if they have to rebuy those games.
That is true.
Well,
that's funny. I completely forgot about that. I heard about the
oh well, that that
thing.
probably is just gonna screw over the people who have bought them physically, like me and Derek, because if they'll probably have some sort of transfer function like the Wii and Wii U had, or the DSi and the 3DS or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So hopefully there's a solution to that. Like maybe you can put in your serial numbers and then download it again, or I don't know, but.
Yeah.
I want to keep backwards compatibility, even if it's just through digital downloads. Because again, like, I don't want to have to pull out my Wii U whenever I want to play Smash for the next, like, 5 years before they make a Smash game for the NX, you know? That would just be annoying, so, yeah.
I'm a little bit less excited at the prospect of there being another screen-based controller, and it's not because I hate the concept. I actually was super excited for the Wii U when it was announced. I actually wasn't nearly as negative about their initial unveiling of it as a lot of people were. Now in hindsight, they obviously made mistakes, but I was excited by the prospect of the gamepad. It's just that Nintendo hasn't made great use of it. I mean, there have been some occasional uses of it, like Mario Maker right now actually makes really good use of it. Even if it's not particularly innovative use, it does work really well for the game. It's just something we haven't seen much of from Nintendo. And so if there is another screen-based controller, I really hope they have some better ideas for it than just letting it go to waste or using it for minimal functionality like a horn in Mario Kart.
Yeah, you can't really argue that there haven't been an awful lot of creative uses for it. Like, most of the best games that use it, it's just been a map. And, you know, for what it's worth, I love having a map on the bottom screen. Like, I love that in DS games, too, just because I don't have to pause and pull the thing up all the time. You know, I love the gamepad in Pikmin 3, I love it in Splatoon, but you can't, like, you know, when you think of the super innovative things that they could have done with it, you know, it's just, it is a little bit wasteful, but, you know, then again, honestly, I think that the utility of having two screens is a little bit less obvious than, you know, just simply having motion controls. Like, there's a lot of instant ideas that come from the that you can get from having a controller that you can move to do stuff with, as opposed to having a second screen. And now, granted, you could probably get some more interesting and layered ideas with the two screen mechanic, but that would also be a really kind of hard thing to develop for. So it honestly, when you look back, it's not too surprising that it hasn't resulted in too much that's super interesting.
Yeah, see, I'm actually with you on liking the two screens on the 3DS. Like, I like having that instant access to the map. I dislike that a lot, I don't like it nearly as much on the Wii U. But I find it takes me out of the experience when I have to look off the TV to the gamepad and back again. So like in Mario Kart, like, basically if I'm looking at the gamepad, I'm gonna screw up. Like, I'm not racing as well as it should be. Like, it's a huge distraction to look from one to the other. It did work pretty well in Splatoon, but that was because I mostly only looked at the gamepad when I was dead, and I could look where to spawn at. So once they introduced like the on-screen map to Mario Kart, I use that only instead of the gamepad. So yeah, I mean, I do think there's potential for a screen-based controller for a home console. I just wish they would find better uses of it than just a map or something I have to look at while looking at the TV at the same time. So, yep.
Yep, we'll see if they just use it for backwards compatibility, or if they're going to try more ideas with it. I'm not sure. My gut tells me they're probably going to be mostly abandoning it, and just sort of having it there for one reason or another. But it's not going to be their main focal point for this console.
Now, there's one other idea. I think we covered NX pretty well. There was only one other thing here, and I could be off base. I mean, I'm not great at reading patents, so. But what if this actually isn't describing the, Nintendo's next console? What if it's like just a revised Wii U? What if it's just like a smaller Wii U, download only, and that would explain the screen controller, right? So
yeah, it would.
They did do something similar with the Wii,
That's
actually, right, where they had no GameCube slot. It was absolutely tiny, and I think that would make sense, especially considering that I think people would be more on board with, say, a Wii U that's digital only. As opposed to a whole new console that's digital only, because I think it would freak people out less, I think, a little bit, because it's like, oh, I've got the option to buy a digital only platform, or I can buy one that has a disc and maybe is a little bit more expensive. And you know what? I think that's actually a good way to test the waters for an NX platform, because, if people are liking the digital only option, maybe they'll introduce that with the NX as well. So, that's actually not a bad idea to have like a Wii U Slim or whatever that they end up calling.
No, I agree with that. It's a really good idea. I kind of had that thought myself, but I was like, they seem so ready to move on to the NX, so it seems odd to me that they would redesign the Wii U now. But maybe they are. Maybe they're doing something with it, and I don't know. It's hard to predict Nintendo.
It is. I mean, it would make sense in the fact that Nintendo hasn't really reduced the price of the Wii U yet. They've just been maintaining the same price point since its launch, and this would be a good way of reducing its price. Get some, wring out whatever sales they can out of the console before they fully move on to the NX.
Yeah, and especially I think it does make some amount of sense to use it as a stopgap before the NX comes out, and especially considering that they've got two pretty big hits coming their way. Like Splatoon has been a pretty big success for them, and Mario Maker is, if that doesn't do well, I think that they don't have much hope in general. But everybody's really excited for that game. So
yeah, I think Mario Maker's gonna do just fine.
Yeah, so I think that I think that it might more just be like a stopgap kind of solution that they maybe release at the end of maybe not the end of this year, because if they're just in the patent stage now, it's a little bit early. It's a little bit late to have it out this year, but maybe like if the NX comes out in 2017, they'd release this sometime 2016 to hold people off or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense.
But in my mind,
because out there is that the NX will be releasing next year. Which is kind of nuts if that's the case, but that's really soon. I mean, we'd be hearing about it at the latest, I imagine, by next E3. So this is a really exciting time, assuming that's the case. It may not be, but hopefully it is, because I want to be excited. But yeah, it seems like, there's a lot of exciting, like every tidbit I hear about just gets me more and more excited to find out more about the system and what it's going to be. Anyways, I think that about wraps up for us here, so thanks guys for watching. If you liked our discussion, make sure to like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. We post all kinds of things there, it's a good way to keep up to date on everything we post. And Ted, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you at?
I'm a member of Brain Scratch Commentaries. We do video game playthroughs and commentaries on all sorts of different stuff, a lot of Nintendo stuff, so if you're into that, it's a good time, so you should check it out.
Alright, sounds good. And of course, keep an eye on our YouTube channel for more on everything Nintendo, but mostly Mario Maker at this point, but other things too. Alright, thanks for watching guys. Bye.